finance for Amazon in India. It's my pleasure to welcome you for today's Consumer Trust Summit. Ms. Leela Nandanji, Secretary, Consumer Affairs, Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution, Mr. Jamshed Dabuji, Co-Chair, FICCI Retail and Internal Trade Committee and Independent Advisor, Consumer Retail Hospitality and Ex-Managing Director of Trent Hypermarket, Mr. Vivek Katoch, Chair, FICCI Direct Selling Task Force and Corporate Affairs Director for Asia, Oriflame India Limited, Mr. Dilip Chenoy, Secretary General of FICCI, Professor Bijon Misra, and all the other distinguished attendees. Good morning to you all. It's my pleasure to once again welcome you all for the Consumer and the Customer Trust Summit for 2021. I would like to start by thanking all the distinguished attendees. I think each of you in your respective areas have been working tirelessly in the consumer trust space to highlight and generate awareness on issues that affect customers and also to take concrete steps towards mitigating the same. The theme of this event is Earn, Empathize, and Empower. India's economy, as we know, will grow from 2 trillion to about 5 trillion by 2025. This growth, as is the government's vision, will happen primarily through growth in consumption. This growth, in turn, will generate employment, create jobs, create infrastructure, drive exports, uplift medium and small enterprises, and also raise standards of living for consumers and citizens, and thus help to make India an economic superpower. To grow consumption, the customer or consumer, as some of us call it, is the most important person at the center of this value chain. If you look at the demand side, the single biggest variable that can be fired up to drive and improve consumption is to improve trust. And that is what the theme of today's conference is about. The recent COVID pandemic has seen a big shift in customer behavior. Customers have moved to online. They have prioritized safety and trust. And at the earliest opportunity, they have gone back to buying from kiranas because that is where they see trust as being maximized. We've also seen them turn to brands and marketplaces and platforms that they trust. They have also shopped offline at stores and retail units where they really trust. Trust for a customer is probably expressed very simply in the following language. Is the product that I'm buying safe? Is the price that I'm paying for this product the correct and appropriate price to pay for it? Is this product genuine or is this a counterfeit? Will this product or service work as promised or as advertised? Is my mode of payment safe? If I don't like this product, can I return it? If I return it, will I get my money back? If I've ordered it online, will it be delivered to me on time and intact without any damages? If I have any complaint with the product or service, who do I complain to? And do I get the reassurance that my complaint will be acted upon? In the simplest possible language, this is what customer trust means today. Online and offline must strive to answer these questions to make the customer comfortable when he or she makes the purchase decision. It's also important to note that future growth in consumption is going to come from tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Customers in these geos probably don't speak English. They probably don't even speak Hindi. They speak different vernacular languages, and trust has to be delivered to them in the language and context that they're most familiar with. The role of the government in all this is to make the right set of enabling rules that provide the right incentive and drive the right behavior among people who are serving these customers. The government must also make rules so that there is incentive and penalties for wrong behavior. These rules should be simple and consistent for everyone. They should promote greater choice for the customer and link back directly to be able to demonstrate customer trust. I'm thankful and grateful to Ms. Leela Nandanji, Secretary Consumer Affairs, for taking time out of a busy schedule to attend the summit. She has always been a key driver for numerous policy initiatives, and I express my gratitude for the steps taken by the government to empower customers through awareness and education. The Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution has indeed been at the forefront of undertakings aiming to promote and protect the welfare of consumers and strengthen the consumer movement in India. I'm certain that the audience will benefit immensely from the esteemed speakers' thoughts and discussions today. Thank you very much. Welcome to the summit, and back to Mr. Jamshed Dabuji.
Thank you, Mr. Rao. I think this whole vector of moving from transaction to trust is an all-important and all-consuming task that both private sector as well as government needs to undertake on a war footing. It is important for us to understand the genesis for this need so that we know what are the key drivers that currently prevail in the industry. According to me, there are three axes on which change is taking place, and this change is taking place rapidly. The first axis has started actually much before COVID and much before the platforms came into being, and that was the axis of modernization of trade in India. It is not so long ago that a lot of retail was taken place in neighborhood stores, not only for food retail, but even for other kinds of retail. And even if the store was not in the neighborhood, it was certainly in areas where the store owner was there for a number of years, was known to the family, and therefore there was a huge amount of relationship which was built between the store owner and the consumer. This changed over time when modern trade started penetrating the Indian retail scenario. And the store owner was replaced by a store manager. And therefore, what was an intense relationship between the buyer and the seller started moving actually backwards to a more transactional relationship between the store and the customer. Now, store managers come and go, they are rotated every 3 years. And as a result of which, even though there are physical stores present, the customer started seeing the entire interaction as a transaction and not as a building of trust. Subsequent to this was the entire movement towards e-commerce. And in fact, what I call faceless retail started becoming more and more with the advent of e-commerce in India. As we all know, when it comes to virtual retail, there is virtually no contact between the customer and the platform, and beyond the platform to the retailer who's supplying on the platform. Having said that, a lot of mechanisms have indeed been put in place to improve this connect. But according to me, a lot more needs to be done. Hence, the first axis on which dramatic change has taken place is due to the fact that the where of shopping, where is it that we shop, has undergone a change over the last 15 years or so. The second more aspect of what now customers are really focusing on is what is it that they are shopping for. I think this whole COVID-19 phenomena has not only accelerated the move to online, which is to even more faceless shopping, but also made consumers aware of what they are consuming, what they should consume, and what they ought not to consume. As a result of which, it is very, very evident that customers are constantly seeking more and more information about products and services that they are sourcing. And not only are they seeking information, they are seeking reliable information for the products and services that they're seeking. Now, earlier, all information around a product was provided by the local neighborhood retailer. Now, that is no longer the case. And as a result of which, customers are now looking for trusted sources of information. And very often, more often than not, customers don't trust companies themselves to give that information. and therefore are looking at either peer group or looking at independent bodies to seek out this information which is important and relevant for customers. And the third axis on which change has taken place, as rightly pointed out by Mr. Rao, is the who of shopping behavior. Increasingly, due to the aspirational nature of our country, due to the rising incomes, a lot more people are coming in to the retail shopping ambit and are shopping products and services which earlier they were not shopping. Now, these people who are entering into the system are possibly, I'm just saying, not as discerning and not as savvy as people who have already been in the system, and therefore need assurances and need confidence building, which is perhaps not forthcoming today on the various online and offline platforms which exist. So, given these three phenomena, the move from traditional retail to modern retail, the move of customer behavior from blindly trusting a brand to looking at additional product and service information, and the third being the fact that a larger number of people are now coming into the modern shopping arena, all become key drivers for the move from transaction to trust. Now, over the years, offline players, online players, and the government, or maybe in the reverse order, have done a huge amount of work in order to facilitate this transition. But as we all know, more work needs to be done, and more work is always welcome. So, in order for us to now understand what is it that is being done, what is it that can be done, and what is the impact that what is being done can have, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker for the day, Srimati Leena Nandan. Srimati Nandan is the Secretary Consumer Affairs and is amongst the senior most IAS officers from the UP cadre. She has previously held important positions both at the center and the state, such as Special Secretary in the Ministry of Road Transport and Highway, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Tourism, Managing Director, UP Women's Welfare Corporation, Managing Director, UP Tourism Development Corporation, and DM in 4 districts of UP. While working in the tourism department in Uttar Pradesh, she focused on creating a core of tourist police comprising ex-servicemen for tourist facilitation and assistance, especially in cities like Agra and Varanasi. And ma'am, I have looked after hotels of the Taj in Agra and Varanasi, and I really welcome the initiatives that you have taken there. During her tenure in the tourism ministry, she devoted special attention to social awareness campaigns, Atiti Devo Bhava, the rural tourism scheme, which has demonstrated its ability to generate inclusive growth and empower women, which was especially close to her heart. Srimati Nandan has keen interest in writing, and her articles have been published in the Times of India, Hindustan Times, Indian Express, and others. She has co-authored a book, How to Placate an Angry Naga, Finding One's Feet in the IAS, which was published by Penguin in 2007. We at FICCI, ma'am, are indeed fortunate to have you as our keynote speaker. And may I now hand it over to you for your address. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dabu, Mr. Rao, Mr. Katoch, all industry players who are present in this summit today, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very glad to be a part of the deliberations in this opening session, particularly to talk about the issue of consumer trust. Trust is is a word that if we look at it very loosely, it is nothing but faith, confidence, and something that gives you a value to the judgment that you will exercise over the choice, the multiple choices that you have. And that is why trust is such a key aspect when it comes to transactions. If we look at the word consumer, sometimes it becomes an issue, particularly when we are interacting with the industry, with the manufacturing sector, or with the sector which is providing services. Sometimes it becomes an issue of us and them. But if we look at it in a broad sense, we are all consumers. We are all consumers of goods and services in some way or the other, not only in our individual lives and our individual capacities, but we are also institutional consumers. So if we avail of the services if we are going to a school or college or educational institution, if we are going to a hotel, or if we are taking medical treatment in a hospital, we are availing of some services that as institutional consumers. So everywhere there is some consumption of some product or service that we are availing of consciously or unconsciously. And we always demand the best. We expect nothing but the right standards, the quality, and in very simple terms, we expect value for money. But who is it at the opposite end of the spectrum? Who is it that we expect will give us this quality, will make us feel confident about whatever we thought we were purchasing and we were availing of, and whether indeed we have been able to get that particular good or service of that standard which is commensurate with the value that we are paying for it. And that is the reason why we talk about issues like brand loyalty, we talk about trust, and we talk about a quality ecosystem being in place. Here I will digress a bit from the main subject of consumer trust and what we need to do to build that trust across the board in all avenues of life. And I will like to talk very briefly about the Bureau of Indian Standards. That is an autonomous organization which works with the Department of Consumer Affairs. It is committed to maintaining standards and quality, and now more and more products coming into this area of mandatory certification, QCOs as we call them, where quality control orders are issued by the concerned departments or ministries. More and more products are falling within the ambit of certain mandatory standards that they have to adhere to. And we are trying to educate consumers about, wherever those standards are voluntary, the value of an ISI mark. So through the aegis of today's summit, I would like to request all the industry players that there is need for a continuous dialogue with BIS, and to understand what is it that they are doing in the area of creating a quality ecosystem. Because BIS's mandate, as I see it, and in fact it is the organization which was set up even before India became independent. 6th January 1947 is when the BIS came into being. The first standard that they made was of the Indian flag. So that is the place that it holds in the overall scheme of things, and we have tried to keep pace with the changing times. We have tried to modernize the way BIS works, digitize systems, bring in efficiency, transparency, and more to keep it open for industry to come back with issues, suggestions, problems, so that we all work together to create the kind of quality ecosystem that we dreamt of when we set up this organization. So the first thing that I would like to mention here is that various initiatives that have been taken by the BIS, whether it is with respect to marking fees especially for the MSME enterprises in the country, renewal of license, special efforts that they have taken keeping the pandemic in mind, and what more they can do to really become a part of what the industry needs. Again, it is not a question of us and them. We are all working towards the same goal. And that is why industry collaboration and participation, I'm sure FICCI is a part of many of the sectional committees that BIS has on various technical standards. But it is important for you to reach out to your members to get ideas and suggestions, and to share them with the BIS as and when the need arises, to share them with government, so that we are fully abreast of what is it that is required, It should not be that we are working in a silo, we are working with some ideas in our mind as to the right way to go, which is completely at variance with what the industry and indeed what the country needs. So that is something which I particularly would like to highlight when we talk about quality and standards. The next issue is, what is it that we as government are doing to safeguard the interests of consumers, and whether we are keeping pace with the changing nature of transactions in the country. And you all would be very well aware, and there has been a lot of uh, interaction, a lot of feedback that has been coming to us. We have a set of e-commerce rules that we had notified last year, and some changes that have been suggested. Some views have come up, some more views need to be articulated, to be brought up to the government, and we need to have consultation, because when we say consultation, we mean it in the real sense. That is why whatever changes have been proposed, we are very open to receiving suggestions, very concrete, suggestions which not only talk about the particular clause that we are seeking to amend or introduce, but even the wording of it. What is it that would be better suited to, express the concerns of government and take care of the needs of consumers? The same is true for the direct selling rules, which also have been put out in a draft form, and where we are seeking comments and views of the industry. So everywhere the idea is to have consultation, to have deliberations, and to take forward all these initiatives in the best possible manner, because we are not talking at cross purposes. We have all the same objective in mind. We can all grow as a country if manufacturing and services grow. And the more that we have consumer confidence, the more consumption of goods and services, the more we are able to rotate the economic growth elements and bring them into a very vibrant way forward. The Consumer Protection Act is now the third pillar of what I am referring to. Obviously, whatever rules that we have talked about are flowing from the Act, but the Act has also taken up avenues for consumers in such a way that it is of benefit to the industry also. The earlier Act had a provision where the consumer necessarily had to go in for any redressal of any grievance to the Consumer Commission located in that particular district where the goods or services had been purchased. Not so any longer, with the Consumer Protection Act 2019 having been brought into force from last year. Now, the consumer can apply to a consumer commission either where they reside or where they purchase the good or service. And added to this facility is the facility of e-dakhil. So e-filing of the consumer complaint is now possible, and it has been brought into being in 17 states across the country, so that consumers can file their grievances from anywhere to any consumer commission. Now you may ask, how does this facility to the consumer help the industry and help the retailer? When we are traveling out of our place of residence, we would normally, as for business purposes or for our leisure purposes on holiday or to meet friends and family, we would be moving across the country. Now we would no longer as consumers hesitate in purchasing any product simply on the grounds that if I have a problem with the quality, if I have a certain grievance which comes to light only when I have gone back to my place of residence, what will I do? I cannot go back to that state where I had from where I had purchased that particular good. But now with the provisions in the Consumer Protection Act, making it agnostic, making it place agnostic, it is possible for us to happily pick up anything which comes, which appeals to us at any store in the country without any worry as to what will happen if we are not satisfied with the way that product or service actions out when we start using it. And that is something which is a very big aspect and very important aspect of the Act, and which we expect will have a bearing on the one who is supplying that goods or service, as well as the consumer who is availing of that goods or service, because it has broken down the barrier, it has broken down the concern and the worry about whether we are able to get the redressal in the best way possible. And now we are pushing for setting up of mediation panels in the consumer commissions, so that it is even easier for both parties, if they agree then the issue can be referred to a mediation panel. It need not go through this entire process. Even though we have tried to short circuit it, we have tried to fast track it through the new rules and regulations that have been notified under the Act. We are trying to take it a step forward and bring out the mediation panel. So we are actively pursuing with the state governments and with the National Commission, so that both at the National Commission level and at the State Consumer and District Consumer Commission level, mediation panels can be set up where mutually the industry and the consumer can agree that through the mediation process, this entire thing can be very result oriented, and by mutual consent a decision can be arrived at to the satisfaction of both parties for any grievance or any complaint. Therefore, when we talk about the rule position and we talk about the various efforts that we are making to safeguard the interest of consumers, all these initiatives are part and parcel of the exercise. But the ultimate objective is the consumer should be able to exercise the choice, and when the consumer does that, procures goods and services, that is when the country will continue to grow, because consumption is key to the vibrant economy being in place. Another act which is also in place, where quality and quantity, when we talk about quality, we spoke about, I mentioned the BIS, the quantity aspects, the quantity assurance is taken care of through the Legal Metrology Act. And the Legal Metrology Act particularly looks at not just the quantity in terms of measurement in kilograms or in liters of the particular product that is being purchased, but it also talks about the information that is mandatory as part of the packaged commodity rules. And if we are able to adhere to the commitment in terms of the quantity that we are assuring that the consumer is purchasing, because whatever we are saying is the weight or measurement of that particular item which he or she is purchasing, we simply have to adhere to it. So if we are able to keep our end of the bargain, there is no reason why the consumer should feel shortchanged. There is no reason why he or she should not have a feeling of trust and faith in the company and in the retailer and trader from where he has purchased it. So we have to keep our end of the bargain, and there is no reason why at the other side the consumer should not be satisfied, should not come back time and again to the same place from where they have procured their goods, or to the same company whose whose goods they value, for whom they have developed brand loyalty. So therefore, we each, if we adhere to our side of the bargain, if we are ready to listen to genuine grievances, if we respond within time, if we have consumer care centers that respond, then in the long run, if we do not look at our short term interests, where we perhaps ignore the consumer because we think that it doesn't really matter, but the consumer does matter, and we will ignore his grievance at our own peril, because in today's social media, in this digitally connected world, it is very easy for their views, their grievances, their complaints to reach the widest possible audience. So therefore, the more we respond, the better we respond, the more we stand a good chance of retaining the consumer's faith, retaining his trust in the product or service that we have offered. And when we work together as government and as industry, when we are able to articulate the concerns that we have, so government is not only talking in a very limited context of only the consumer's interests, because consumer will really be king if there is competition, if there is no monopoly in goods and services. If we are not able to recognize this fact, then we as government would have also failed in our task. If we are unable to make an ecosystem where there is maximum competition, so that the right value of goods and services is offered to the consumer, and that is where he or she can exercise their choice and get the right product or service. So we also are cognizant of the need to have the right competition and the competitive atmosphere maintained in whatever platforms are there, for consumers to be able to take care of their interests, to be able to take care of their concerns of the right information, the right choice, the right quality, and the right avenues for redressal. So these are the few of the issues that come to our mind when we as government talk to the industry, and through the industry we take into account your concerns and your views and suggestions. And we would again, to reiterate what I had said earlier on, through these forum, through these summit and conferences, we look forward to receiving information and suggestions, comments from all of you individually as well as through an association, on whatever are the way forward that you think is needed to take into care, to take into account our joint concerns, so that we are able to move forward in the best manner for the economic growth of this country. Thank you, and all good wishes for very meaningful and successful discussions and deliberations. And I look forward to getting the inputs and suggestions that emerge out of the discussions today. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for this insightful session. Over the years, the government has done a lot of confidence building measures for the general public and for consumers, be it the ISI, be it AgMark, be it FSSI, be it the Jago Grahak Jago campaigns. Perhaps one of the things which we could look at considering is to have some sort of a certification. It could be self, it could be third-party certification for even e-commerce platforms themselves. Given the movement that is happening towards e-commerce platforms, and given the ease with which a platform can be put up, perhaps some sort of a certification mechanism might give the customer more confidence, just the way an ISI mark gives confidence, or just the way an FSSI registration gives confidence to consumers. And that's perhaps something which we could think of, and maybe even think of in FICCI, to see if any such standard can be established so that we can separate the wheat from the chaff. Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, may I request you now to formally launch our report on a progressive shift from transaction to trust. Please. Thank you so much. Let me give our audience a gist of what this report is about. The whole idea was to provide industry insights to showcase the transformation of online marketplace platforms, which have moved just from a few transactions to a way of life, and to understand and focus on consumer trust and the role that it plays in sustaining these online purchase behaviors. So that was the purpose of doing a report. The report insights are as under: the online marketplace industry is transitioning from an experimental channel to a default buying channel for many, primarily due to the rising customer trust on the platforms. Massive growth in online transactions have been driven by evolving government, platform, and brand efforts that are serving to gradually instill customer confidence. As we all know, COVID-19 has brought forth a new era in customer purchasing behaviors, with transition to digital consumption at an all-time high. And these numbers may surprise you. 68% more consumers were shopping online post-COVID. And not only that, online marketplaces became a lifeline for smaller retailers during COVID-19, helping them transition from offline selling to online selling, and thus providing very, very critical sustenance to their business. In fact, 75% of all small businesses preferred to sell online due to the pandemic. And this sector is empowering women, rural sellers, and MSMEs, and is set to generate an additional 1 million direct jobs by 2023. And that's the whole phenomenon that is happening in front of us. Of course, we must all remember that a large part of this has also been enabled by the general thrust towards a digital economy, which has been laid out by the government of the day, including the entire transformation of the payments economy through digitization. And that, in my view, has played a very, very important catalyst role in moving consumption onto digital platforms. The report has been drawn up using a very extensive methodology. Initially, there was a survey which was done, which took into account the views of 1,357 respondents, 670 from the Tier 1 cities, and 687 from Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. One-to-one interviews were conducted with senior leadership at various leading online commerce marketplaces. And of course, an extensive secondary research was done for published industry reports, government sources, articles from news websites, credible news websites, and industry webinars. So all in all, I think this is an extremely useful insight that has been provided to us by this report, and I would urge all of us to gain access to this report, and I'm sure Vicky will let us know how we can get access to this report so that we can really understand the key drivers of online commerce and the key elements of the movement from transition to trust. Thank you, ma'am, once again for launching our report and for being with us as the keynote speaker. I would now like to invite Mr. Vivek Katoch, the chair of the FICCI Direct Selling Task Force and Corporate Affairs Director, Asia, Oriflame India Private Limited, to propose a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Jamshed. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As we come to the closure of the inaugural session of the Customer Trust Summit, it's my great honor to extend the vote of thanks to all. The Consumer Protection Act is a significant step forward in consumer empowerment. It has not only broadened the definition of a consumer, but have provided them a wider range of the powers, such as ability to institute complaints, e-complaints from a place of residence or work. We at FICCI applaud the government for making this landmarking shift from the previous Act of 1986. We believe that this Act will go a long way in safeguarding the interest of the consumers in India against the unlawful business activities, unfair trade practices, and serve as a speedy resolution mechanism to the consumer-related disputes. On behalf of FICCI, I would take this opportunity to thank Ms. Leena Nandan ma'am, Secretary Consumer Affairs, Government of India, for being with us today and enlightening us with the technical knowledge and expertise on this very important topic, and also regarding the development made to the safeguarding the interests of the consumer, regarding mediation cell, about the development of BIS, Legal Metrology Act. Ma'am, it was an honor and privilege to listen to your words of wisdom, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for bringing out direct selling rules, which are much awaited. Ma'am, FICCI looks forward for your continuous guidance and support, and I would like to congratulate your department and you for supporting the industry during this Black Swan. I would also like to thank Raghav Rao, Vice President Finance and India CFO at Amazon, for sharing his insight on the subject. Thank you, Jamshed, for moderating this session and keeping us connected during the whole session. I would like to thank all my industry colleagues, media friends, and the team FICCI. And I will conclude by saying, a brand is nothing but an expression of the customer's loyalty and trust. Have a great day, everyone. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Leena, are you there? Leena, are you there?
No, ma'am. No, sir. She's not there, sir.
Achha, but how do we get this report now? Hello? How can we get the report?
all to this very interesting conversation with an esteemed list of panel members that we have today on this topic, on how one can collaborate together to build customer trust and promise in various industries. We have people with diverse background here today, people from leading digital and e-commerce companies, esteemed panelists who've worked with government agencies, and people from different sectors of corporate. A warm welcome to the panel members from my side. I'm Abhishek Ganguly. I lead Puma's business in Southeast Asia and India, based in Bangalore. And it's my pleasure to be the moderator for the session today. And before we get started, I thought it would be a good idea for the panel members themselves to give a quick introduction about themselves, because that will lend a good starting color to this conversation and will build context on what their point of view are post that. So if one by one, if you guys can introduce yourself, maybe Daniel, you go first.
Yeah, good morning. My name's Daniel Kingdon. I work for Amazon. I'm currently the Global Product Trust and Regulatory Compliance Director, which sounds very interesting title, but it means I get to do lots of conversations and forums like this, where we talk about how our technology can help safeguard customers and how we want to collaborate with the wider supply chain to help build and maintain trust with customers. My background's in manufacturing and supply chain. So I actually have a background in the products themselves. And I guess my passion really is about making sure that all of the traditional processes that assure products are safe and compliant and authentic, building processes that transfer well onto the digital world, where you don't necessarily have the opportunity to touch everything that you sell. So I guess that's my background and that's my passion today, and that's why I'm interested in being in forums like this.
That's great, Daniel. Pleasure having you. Professor Vajan Mishra, if you can tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you, Abhishek. I've been in the consumer education and advocacy work for the last 35 years, normally doing interventions on policies, bringing in consumer viewpoints within the policies. I sit on the board of several business entities as well as not-for-profit organizations. I founded also several consumer organizations in the country as the founder. I now also attached to 4 universities academically. So I teach on consumer education and awareness, technical issues like the various laws which are coming into the country in terms of consumer protection. So I've been involved with that. So in general, I always try to bring in the consumer's perspective in various conversations, including what is going to happen today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mishra. And Mr. Jha, if you can just tell us a bit about yourself, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, my name is P.C. Jha. I worked in the Indian Revenue Service for 38 years and superannuated in 2009 as chairman of Central Board of Indirect Taxes and the Customs, which is concerned with the customs and the GST. And for last 1 decade, I have been advisor to the FICCI's committee, FICCI, the Cascade. That is the committee which tries to tackle the problem of the smuggling and the counterfeiting activities. I am also associated with the consumer organizations of Professor Vajan Mishra, namely the Consumer Online Foundation and the Patients Safety. I was also for 3 years a director on the board of the Steel Authority of India. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jha. And Madhav, if you can just tell us a bit about yourself. Yes, thanks, Abhishek. Madhav this side from ZFW Hospitality. We're a cloud kitchen company. We've been there for the last 6 years. We're backed by investors across US, Singapore, and India. We're basically a cloud kitchen platform. We help brands expand across multiple geographies using our existing network of kitchens and kitchens with added capacities. I'm also an advisor and different accelerators and funds on food tech. Perfect. I think we are also expecting one more panelist, Mr. Naveen Kundu. I think he should be joining anytime. Irrespective of that, I have 4 gentlemen who are from very diverse fields, but extremely relevant to the conversation. And as India grows into a larger consumer economy with developments in various sectors, I think customer trust is an extremely relevant topic. And like I said before, I think every different elements of the ecosystem needs to collaborate together and not work in silos to build and enhance customer trust. I would start with Daniel. Daniel, if you give us a point of view on how you see this as somebody from an Amazon lens, which is clearly one of the largest e-commerce platforms. And e-commerce comes with its own challenges, right? I mean, you don't have a physical contact with the product before it, while doing the transaction or while discovering the product. And hence, for e-commerce, this is an even a more important topic. Also in India, because Amazon has the marketplace model where diverse sellers, millions and millions of sellers are selling their product. How do you ensure that customers' trust is maintained?
So yes, thank you for that. I will speak to that question in relation to product safety. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak, and good afternoon to all of you that have joined to attend the webinar. And thanks very much for being able to speak first. I really appreciate that. Unfortunately, I have to drop straight after this section, but that doesn't mean that I'm running from any questions. If you'd like to ask me or Amazon anything, please filter your questions via Vicky and I will pick them up offline. It's great to be here. We really recognise Vicky's tireless efforts towards highlighting and generating awareness on the issue of product and brand safety and how that affects customer trust. It's a poignant time. As we all know, India recently witnessed a second wave of COVID-19 cases, and that was unfortunately accompanied by an increase in the circulation of harmful and spurious products. And we feel, therefore, this event represents a really opportune moment for us to deliberate and further strengthen our commitment to fight against unsafe, non-compliant products and other instances of abuse in commerce. Amazon believe that it's only through collaboration with the stakeholders, including industry leaders throughout the supply chain, policymakers, lawmakers, and consumers, that we'll be able to resolve this complex issue. So just a little bit about us in general before I talk about our controls and to answer your question. Amazon strives to be Earth's most customer-centric company, and we treat customer obsession as one of our core principles. And that makes us quite unique. We're obsessed with listening to customers and exceeding their expectations and aligning our business interests with their interests. And that really transcends into our safety controls, listening to them. And I'll come on to that in a second. Our ultimate goal is to ensure that when customers shop on Amazon, they're having the safest and most seamless shopping experience, and they're choosing from the widest possible collection of authentic and safe products. And to your point, by providing tremendous choice and convenience and value to customers, Amazon also provides unprecedented opportunities for businesses as well. However, with millions of customers and selling partners and billions of product listings, unfortunately, Amazon's also become an attractive target for criminals and bad actors who attempt to dupe customers on the online marketplace. And we also have to manage safety on a very large hands-off scale. So we do sell a lot of products through the websites, or are there a lot of products sold to the websites that we don't handle ourselves, to your point. So Amazon has various initiatives and puts in significant resources to make its marketplace a reliable and safe place for customers and brands and sellers to conduct transactions. Now, from a safety and compliance point of view, which is my space, these activities are broadly in 3 buckets. The first bucket is before they're listed. The second one is once they are on the store and available. And then the third bucket is after they're sold. So in the first bucket, before they're listed, we've got detailed help pages that provide information to our selling partners about our safety policies and the standards and regulations they must comply to. Our selling partners must also contractually agree to follow all relevant laws and regulations, and we clearly prohibit the sale of unsafe products. Now, in addition to verifying the seller's identity at the point of them joining, we regularly request safety and compliance documentation from sellers to help ensure the products they list in our store meet the relevant product safety standards. Now, here comes the first big fact. Last year, where selling partners could not provide that information, we removed over 100 million unique products from our stores around the world. Now, once the products are live in the second bucket, we continuously monitor our marketplace for products that are illegal, unsafe, or violate one of our policies. Now, globally, we have tens of thousands of policies or rules which govern the sale of products, including restrictions or bans of certain items. When we do find a problematic listing, we remove it from the store so customers cannot buy it, and we evaluate the potential issue. And then we take the appropriate action, which could include removal of the seller partner account, or it could involve working directly with the sellers, brands, or even directly with government agencies. The third bucket is once the product is sold. We perform constant customer feedback monitoring using technology and people on all listings to identify instances and potential concerns. Last year, we consumed 67 million pieces of customer interaction per week. Now, our intake processes take that information from 14 different languages, and our machine learning tools scan these transcripts for relevant safety concerns. I'm just talking about safety in my speech, but we have relevant processes in other use cases as well. Now, last year, across this feedback, we picked up 2.3 million instances worldwide where a customer was highlighting a potential safety instance, and each one of those was investigated by a human safety expert in the loop, and that led to the suppression of just under 300,000 products. More importantly, though, that data helped feed our proactive listing controls, our first bucket. So in addition to all the work I've just stated in relation to safety, we worked to empower brands and sellers through programs like Brand Registry, where they can register their brands, transparency, and large projects like Project Zero to ensure only authentic products are sold on our marketplace. We investigate any claim of counterfeiting thoroughly, and we remove those items. We permanently remove the bad actors from our stores, and if necessary, we will pursue legal action. As a closing remark, knowing that I'm only speaking once in this panel, Amazon looks forward to working with all the attendees at today's event and other stakeholders on resolving this issue that affects our commerce so deeply. The number of its customer instances of customer abuse is on the rise and needs our immediate and focused attention. Only through meaningful communication and collaboration among actors in the supply chain, we will be able to set up systematic practices to eliminate this issue. Together, we should develop more initiatives to make the consumers aware of the harms these issues bring. And along with that greater consumer awareness and the seller awareness that we are trying to work with, a new holistic policy framework can harness a true potential of online commerce, pushing India towards that $5 trillion economy. With this, I'd like to extend my gratitude to the attendees, and I sincerely hope we can work together to overcome the challenges posed by this menace, eroding customer trust. Thank you.
Well, Daniel, first and foremost, thanks for doing this when I know that you're a bit under the weather, and that's the reason you will have to leave early. And before I let you go, I have actually a question for you, if that's okay with you. Well, my question is that Amazon globally is one of the largest retailers, and in India, a marketplace business. But you are as much a technology company. How do you guys, using technology and automation, detect fraud and abuse, which ultimately helps in protecting the customer and enhancing the customer experience for you guys?
Absolutely, that's the question for us. That's our role in this, absolutely. And it's been a real learning for me to go from being a traditional product technologist, where I'm used to being able to inspect and test, into this new tech world. And it's something that I've become very passionate about. As I've already mentioned, we lean very heavily into technology to enhance the customer protection and to detect and remove suspect listings. And those are continuously improving processes in terms of their accuracy, and we will continue to invest in these processes. What's becoming very exciting is how we're using that data in a predictive sense. And that's where I think we can really add value in collaborative initiatives. Our predictive technology uses both historical and present day data feedback to create a highly impactful proactive tool. So I've already mentioned in my short speech that last year we collected almost 70 million consumer interactions each week. We're now taking that data and continually identifying groups of related items upon common characteristics. So put simply, and this is a presentation I've given a few times in more detail, if we see a red flag in one item, we can immediately link that to related items based on established vectors between that product and others, which allows us to proactively suppress those products while we investigate. This is really useful for where new items are added to our catalog, where we don't have any customer history. Our processes have created almost 8 million unique, what we call data clusters around these red flags. And we've developed tools which enable us to quickly estimate the risk of new products being added to our website with zero customer history whatsoever. Now, this predictive modeling is a really great benefit to us because it allows us to calculate the risk predictions for most units and take corrective actions before they've ever been sold or shipped to a customer. And that's super exciting to me. It moves us from being reactive, brilliantly reactive, to a predictive state. And it starts to give us information and risk evaluations about products that we've never sold before, based on its association with items that we have seen flagged before. So the key for us using this technology is to balance that with the seller partner experience. Abhishek, you mentioned in your introduction about Amazon that we're a platform for small businesses to be successful. It's very important that if we are taking consumer trust measures and consumer safety measures, that we're balancing that with explaining what we're doing with the selling partners. So if they are required to be involved in helping us understand the safety or authenticity of their product, they can do that in a really slick way. So that's the investment we're making at the minute, is to make that completely seamless end to end, working towards a predictive state, but also making sure that our selling partners are having a good experience in that, because they're very much part of the process. And if they're a good actor and their products are good, then there's no reason we shouldn't be making them available to our customers.
Yeah.
Daniel, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here. Thanks for joining in and showing us the Amazon way on the topic. Given that it's early morning for you, I guess it's 8 a.m. in the morning right now. And given that you're not well, really it was a real pleasure, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much. Look forward to the future opportunities as well.
Thank you. Now I'd like to move to Mr. PC Jha, who has had various roles on the government side, and I think I would like to pull him in and ask him, how does the government enforcement, agencies and the private sector, the corporate sector on the consumer side, work together in tandem to build customer trust? Sir, you're on mute. Thank you.
Can I suggest that first I make a few points and then I take your question?
Sure. Why don't you start with your points? Yeah.
Okay, because I feel that the topic of the discussion today is extremely important, particularly in the present time, when in the background of the COVID, the online sale of the goods has increased, and now this will stay. And so in view of this, when the goods and the services are being made available by the e-commerce platforms, then there are certain things which different people who are concerned with this, they have to do. The first point that comes to my mind is that when this type of sale is there through the e-commerce platforms, when the customers actually see the goods, when the goods are delivered to them, they don't get an opportunity to see the goods in advance as they do in the shop. then the security of the supply chain, that becomes very important, right from the time the goods leave the factory gate and the goods reach the hands of the customers. And for I feel that in that there is every possibility as that at different stages, the spurious goods, the goods which are unaccounted, the goods which have been cleared from the factory without payment of the tax, all these types of goods can enter into the supply chain where the quality of the goods will also not be assured. So all these e-commerce platforms have to take care, particular care, that the agencies through whom they procure the goods, they are properly verified, and that the possibility of the substandard goods, unaccounted goods entering into the supply chain, how that can be minimized. I suppose it will not be possible to eliminate it altogether, but the maximum efforts the e-commerce platforms, in my opinion, which I say based on my experience, is that the supply chain security is of utmost importance. In that the context itself, I would like to mention that during the time of COVID, as you will see, that the different aspects of the economy have suffered badly. And one particular area which has suffered severely is the manufacturing. And in the manufacturing, also in particular MSME sector. And this micro, small, medium enterprises, they make large quantities of the consumer goods available for the customers. Now the position is, as we have seen during the last 1 year and 4 months, starting from March last year, that over 100,000 of the manufacturing units in this sector, MSME, have either closed down or their production has reduced. Now, the government has made time to time to give incentives, both the government and the RBI, that how they can come back to their level of production. But I feel that the capacity of these units to absorb the shock is also quite less. With the result, in my opinion, what has happened, that the availability of legal goods in the market has certainly reduced. And so a gap has been created between the demand of the goods by the consumers and the availability of legal goods. So this space would naturally be taken by the illegal goods, the goods which, as I said earlier, are unaccounted, which is manufactured in in such factories which is not in the knowledge of the GST department, and who are not quality conscious. And we have seen that the manufacture of fair goods have gone to this extent that even the medicines, life-saving medicines which are required for the treatment of COVID, like remdesivir, that was the consignments have been seized, where they were found to be fake. They were being manufactured, which was not in the knowledge of the department. So so in this background, the responsibility of the e-commerce platform companies have increased further, that they have to make a very proactive effort that the availability of illicit goods in the market is reduced. And means, so far, one thing is that the verification of the antecedents of the suppliers. The second is this, which is very important, because so far if platform companies were not concerned with this. But now they have to make a conscious effort that how the availability of the illegal goods in the markets will reduce. And that can be done only by the collaboration with the government agencies, by other stakeholders. The government, I can assure you, based on my experience of the government department, that they make their efforts. But the thing is that their capacity is also limited. That the private firms have to know, and they have to collaborate with the government agencies also. Like I can tell you, so far as the customs is concerned, custom has tried that the illegal goods, the import of illegal goods or the export of substandard goods should be stopped. And the customs is trying to do this through the tools which they have got, like the risk management system in the computer system of the department, and also physical check, and also through some gadgets like the scanning of the containers, etc. But there, as we see that our capacity is not of that level as there is in the advanced countries. Still, there are so many ports and air cargo complexes where the scanners are not there. And through this, the smuggling can take place without the possibility of being detected would be less. So these things also the e-platform companies should know, and there should be interaction, more interaction between the government departments, private firms, e-commerce platforms, that what can be done to enhance the capacity of the government. Like again from customs, I will tell you one thing. I mean, you can realize the difficulty of the customs department, that on one hand, the pressure is that goods should be cleared expeditiously from the ports or the air cargo complexes or land customs. And the land customs stations. And on the other hand, there are unscrupulous people who try to take advantage of the speed of clearance of the goods through the customs. And for that, the capacity has to be of the very high level of the customs. And that can happen not only by the efforts of the customs department, it has to be supplemented by the commerce industry associations like FICCI, CII and others, and e-commerce platforms. I think the time is short, so one more point I will make, that so far as this problem of the supply of the illicit substandard goods is concerned, one very important reason is that in our country, because of the penal provisions which is in the law is lax, if a case is detected, then the courts take a long time. So the fear which should be there in the mind of the crooks is lacking. And for that also the steps are needed to be taken. So far as the customs law is concerned, the penal action is severe. But under the other laws like the Trademarks Act, the Copyrights Act, the Patents Act, the maximum penal action, maximum imprisonment is up to 3 years, and the maximum financial penalty can go up to 3 lakhs. I mean, if you see the volume of the profit which is there, I mean, this penal action is totally insufficient. And even to inflict this punishment, the court may take a decade. So this situation has to improve, that unless a deterrence is created both by the severe penal provisions existing in the law and a very, very fast trial of the cases, unless the deterrence is not created, I mean, this type of activities will continue, and for e-platform companies, it will become very difficult. I mean, that how they will find the ways and means that these illicit goods are not supplied to the customers. Until that time this happens, that the customers are not fully assured that when I get the goods to e-commerce platforms, the quality of the goods will be genuine, that when I pay the price for the genuine goods, I should get the genuine goods. That trust to be created is of utmost importance. With this, I finish.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. That was pretty varied and very relevant points. Now I move to Professor Mishra. Sir, if you can let us know with your experience, what do you think on collaboration for building customer trust?
Thank you, Abhishek. In fact, Mr. Jha had been quite elaborative, and he had captured most of the dimensions in terms of how to develop in terms of collaboration. I'll come straight, enhancing trust. I'll take these two key words, enhancing trust. And then the third one is collaboration, which we are doing today. We are collaborating. We have industry people, we have consumer groups, we have former government officials to come and have a discussion. So how do you enhance trust? Trust actually builds on a relationship. And the relationship comes out of a lot of transparency in terms of sharing information. So the most important factor is, what does the consumer look for? There are around 8 high expectations of a consumer all over the world, globally, including India, where we have almost 70% of the consumers living out of rural background and 30% in the urban background. Now, we have diverse kind of expectations, but the key fundamental issues which cuts across everyone is, number one, everybody looks for standard. So if I buy a product, it must adhere to a particular standard. That standard could be a voluntary standard, it could be a mandatory standard. So there are standard setting bodies in the country like BIS, which set standards which are voluntary, and sometimes through some law, we make them mandatory. So the first thing the consumer looks at is, are they practicing good manufacturing practices? Are they adopting the best distribution practices? Are they doing the best retail practices? Now, consumers can't look at all these aspects. So the regulator is there, if it is mandatory. Now, if it is not mandatory, this is where I come. The organizations, the clusters should try to do voluntary code where they assure quality, they assure standard, and they make sure that the consumers believe in that. And that belief comes out of tangible kind of relationship building, So the most important aspect of building trust is, as I said, first is standard. Next comes, you have to ensure that there is some kind of a transparency in sharing information. There has to be a large element of accountability. Like if things go wrong, who do I depend on? I can't go and litigate for everything. For heaven's sake, the biggest challenge in our country is that for a 2,000 rupees refund, we might have to land up spending 2 lakhs of rupees to get that 2,000 rupees. Now, is that fair on the consumer? It's not fair. Now, the companies can go ahead and spend huge sums of money on litigation by engaging the best of lawyers. But how do you expect a common consumer to litigate? You can't. Even if you have district commission, state commission, national commission, it takes years to get redressal, like Mr. Jal mentioned. Now, I want a prompt redressal. What do I want? Simple. To build relationship, you need simple mechanisms of refund and exchange. I buy a product, I don't like it because what was promised was not delivered, or what I perceived was not what was delivered. So I want to exchange. Now it should be very prompt. You cannot, like especially in the pandemic era, when we went through this whole, kind of a pandemic situation, most of us opted to go online. Most of us opted that we should transact online. We went for e-commerce. We encouraged, even my neighborhood shop to reach me the products at home. So we got those kind of facilities. Now what we look for is, if supposing I have paid the money, I am expecting certain value. And if I have not got that value, then naturally I want that my money should come back. So there should be a very good accountable process in place. And everything need not be made mandated. You know, there are very good successful models in our country where industry has come together and developed excellent code of conduct and imposed it on themselves that we will adhere to this code, and they have followed those codes. And they have created ombudsman, they have created third-party oversight to engage with them to ensure that they're delivering what they're promising. So this is again a very important aspect. And of course, you see, the most important aspect, as I said, to build trust is, if I am unhappy, somebody should be able to listen to me. You can't keep telling me that you're important for me, you are in the queue, and you take 2 hours to get back to me. You don't even call me back. You don't even have a facility to call me back. And then you call an helpline number which doesn't work 24/7. You know, I don't call a helpline till it is not 24/7. Because this is the concept, you know, like you all know how Citibank brought that concept, you know, city never sleeps. And we got banking services 24/7. And now after that, many banks came in to give 24/7, and now all the banks give us 24/7, and it's all online transaction. So we have to migrate to certain norms which is of convenience to the consumer, and that what's built the trust. And I'm sure, you know, I'm sure this deliberation will lead towards, you know, like these rules which are being framed for e-commerce, for direct selling, and all the rules which have been framed for the Consumer Protection Act of 2019. All these rules actually will benchmark a quality. It will benchmark in terms of a standard. But what we expect from the industry is not law. We expect that something will be more than the law. And I'm prepared to pay that value. You know, as a consumer, I always look for value addition. And I'm always happy to pay that. You know, more than what you want from me, as long as you create that wow factor. So which means innovation. You have to be innovative. You have to listen to the consumer and bring in those dimensions to build that trust. And I'm sure, you know, we are all working towards that in India. Very soon we will be able to build a 5 trillion economy in the country, because the consumers will consume more and more as days go by. And we will have a vibrant industry in the country. And all the players who are engaged in the supply chain, in the manufacturing business, in the complete, you know, from farm to the fork, you know, business supply chain, they will all work in a collaborative manner. And I congratulate FICCI for organizing this consultation, to organize this, you know, panel discussion. And thank you very much for inviting me. I feel very happy when industry also invites a consumer representative in such kind of a conversation. So I've been always proud to be with FICCI, and I've been engaged with FICCI for the last more than 30 years. I feel very happy about that relationship. Thank you very much, Abhishek.
Professor Mishra, I must say it was very powerful message for somebody like me as well, who's from the industry. And I definitely have takeaways. It gives reinforcement and clarity on how sometimes we should over-index on the customer and on redressing his issues, and how it can go a long way in creating sustainable business for an organizer, for a company. So thank you on that. I'll get in Naveen here. Naveen, you joined in a bit late. We had done a round of introduction. So if you can just tell us a bit about yourself, and for your industry, if you can give color to the topic. And I must admit, we are running a bit
I will be very, very brief. Don't worry about it. Even I have to move to another meeting. But thank you for having me on this forum. And my apologies. I logged in a little late. I was just caught up. But so my name is Naveen Kundu, and I am the Managing Director for Ebik's Cash Travel Services business in India and Asia. I don't know when most of you know Ebik's Cash. Ebik is a NASDAQ listed company which came to India in 2016-17 on a vision of investing $1 billion in the business of service technology and build the largest financial exchange in this country. And in pursuit of that, they bought a few companies, which was in the travel space, the foreign exchange space, and the technology space. We also have a joint venture with the BSC for BSC Insurance. This is called the BSC Ebik Insurance for insurance distribution. So Ebik is a diversified group. And in India, we are making very quick progress in becoming one of the largest financial technology enterprise in India. Coming back to the forum of customer trust. You know, I've been in the industry, the travel and tourism industry for 30 years. And I can tell you the most difficult part of satisfying a consumer is by the travel companies. We face an undaunting task of, satisfying customers, because we are not in control of anything, but yet we are responsible for everything. An airline can goof up, a baggage can get lost, a meal cannot come on time, a meal can get exchanged, a hotel can goof up on the housekeeping or on food and beverage. Anything can go wrong. And the responsibility is on the travel company. That is one biggest challenge we face with the customers. The second challenge, and I'll also come to the solutions that we provide. The second part in the industry is we are yet not an industry in India, whereas we employ the largest number of people in the country. We contribute 10% to the GDP of India. And we are not an industry. We don't have a regulatory. The biggest problem with travel industry is we don't have a regulatory. Any small personality can come up and open a travel agency, and the customer compares a small time vendor with a large company because the delivery of the product is the same. He sells the same hotel room and the ticket. We sell the same hotel room and the ticket. The differences of magnitude, but the service is the same. The value is the same at the end of the day to the client. In spite of all this, and I can give you a biggest example for when pandemic struck us, tourism was the worst hit sector. And there are people who had made bookings on our airline system and our hotel systems. And we did not get refunds. Airlines said we will provide a credit shell, and when we start flying, people will have to redeem that money from the credit shell to use it for their services, least knowing how many will survive, how many will actually travel. There was no clarity. And we started every travel company in India, from as large as Make My Trip and Thomas Cook to as small as a small time vendor, started getting flack from the customers in terms of what's going wrong. Why do I have to? I have given the money to you. You have to refund the money to me. I don't care what the airline tells you. So much so the matter even went up to the Supreme Court for the refunds of the airline. And there were millions. It was not a small time refund. Airlines had to pay back crores and crores of money to the travel companies because we had given them advances for group travels. B, all the retail business that was booked with them, which got cancelled, readjustments. It was a lot of money, and the customer felt cheated. I cannot tell you about the rest of the industry what they did. I can tell you what I personally believe is that in the very early part of my business with travel industry, I realized the best way to solve problems when it comes to the customer trust and earn his trust is personalization. Our industry works completely on personalization. No matter how effective is your user interface, no matter how effective is your technology, no matter how seamless is your business, what a customer looks forward is, and as Mr. Mishra said, to build a relationship, you have to be personalized. A helpline is not a helpline till the time the person on the other side says, "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" And personalization is single key factor in building the trust of the client or the industry when it comes to travel and tourism industry and hotel industry. Our jaws can ache, but we have to keep smiling. We cannot confront a customer because customers' trust is very, very hard for us to earn because everything is available to him for comparison. To get the value, he wants to, if I'm giving him a price, he has to figure out whether he's getting the right value or not. And I'm not even talking about retail. I'm talking about institutional, retail, group travel, corporate travel. Everywhere there's a trust deficit because we don't have a regulatory. When there's no regulatory, there's a trust deficit. To overcome the trust deficit, in the business of travel and tourism, you tend to work much harder than the other industries work because I deal I am also a consumer. When I deal with a lot of other companies in consumer products, I find that the amount of hard work that the travel and tourism industry has to put in to earn the trust and faith of the customer is far, far, far greater than what the other industries do. I'm not trying to compare, but I'm trying to give you a first-hand information because I'm also a consumer at the end of the day. But believe you me, I'll give you an example. A visa gets delayed by an embassy. An embassy does not answer the calls and says, go to the courier agency. Courier agency says, it's not in our hands, go to the embassy. Nobody answers calls, nobody replies on emails. You have a flight tonight, you were supposed to be given a visa in 5 days or 15 days, you've not got the visa. The complete blame comes onto the travel company when we are not responsible for it, but we have to handle it. We have to handle it. And the only way to handle it is personalization. As long as and that is why, if you see, while online industry is here to stay in travel business, your mom and pop shop, the brick and mortar business is here to stay because they are the ones who provide that kind of a personalized service. And that is the only thing left in this business now, because the government hasn't done anything to help us out, even during pandemic. Airlines or the suppliers haven't done anything great to bring back the trust of the consumer because there are still millions and dollars of refund spending from the airlines during this pandemic. So what do? You are left to fend for yourself. And that is why I say travel and tourism industry is biggest sufferer when it comes to the supply chain management, but the biggest enabler when it comes to providing personalization. So personalization is the key. I will be very short, but as I said, while with personalization comes standards and standardization. It is very important for travel industry to train its people to provide the standards and not bluff the customer. The problem, why do I say that we need regulatory? We need regulatory because there has to be an entry barrier in a business. Today, there is no entry barrier in a business. Somebody working down the line in an organization goes and sets up a shop tomorrow and starts bullshitting a customer. And the customer also looking at the value buys it and then faces problems. So entry barrier is a must in our business. And that once that happens, I think the travel industry will flourish further. So standardization and relationships. So personalization, standardization, and relationships, coupled with a lot of transparency. And that is happening these days because since the commissions of the third party commissions are shrinking by the day from airlines and hotels, more and more industry is moving to service charge. However, the customers are very, very difficult. They don't want to pay the service charge because they feel that we earn a lot of back-end commissions. Again, I go back to because there's no regulatory. Having said that, it is the building of relationship and transparency in the business that's actually enabling the customers to still go to a travel agent. And I'm talking on behalf of all the travel agents today. And that is my perspective of dealing with the business. And that is the perspective of the travel industry. Thank you.
Well, Naveen, this was very enlightening for us. And I think one thing that I could see as a thread is to put the customer's needs first, right? I mean, you put that and you build your entire organization structures and processes and train and standardize. But I think it's also links to what Professor Mishra had said, that, you become an organization which the customers love to transact with. I think that builds trust, and
that's what I said. What Mr. Mishra said is, and what I believe in is, bring in that personalization, and you will withhold the customer with you lifelong. For example, I can tell you, I started as a salesman in the industry, and today I'm heading an organization. My customers of 30 years are still traveling with me. They don't change me. And from the likes of Mr. Aditya Puri to Mr. Sandeep Bakshi to all these people who were managers in their company when I started my business and when I started working, today they are still traveling with me because of that relationship, faith, and trust, and transparency.
Can I just can I quickly ask something to Ms. Naveen quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Naveen, by any chance, are you linked? Naveen, are you by any chance linked with Kundu Travels?
No, I'm not. I am not at all. There's no connection.
No, because in my young days, in my young days in Eastern India, it was a huge brand. It
Oh,
was
yes.
a huge brand.
Of course.
You know, and I don't know whether you are aware or not, but they had such a great brand, especially for the, you know, the missing middle class, you know, the missing middle class. And they used to give real value to the customers. And so your name is synonymous. And I appreciate you are in the travel business. And by the way, I was also in the travel business for 20 years.
I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that. Yes. But thank you very much. At least I will live by the. I'm happy that I'm trying to live by the brand name of Kundu Travels being a surname. So thank you very much. But I have nothing to do with that.
These insights actually add a lot of grease to the conversation, I think, which is fantastic. I wish we had more time for this, but I need to do my job of finishing this. I'm already running 9 minutes ahead, but I think before I move to the last panelist, which is Madhav, I think overall it's such a powerful conversation that has already happened, and I'll try to do a quick recap at the end. So Madhav, sorry to put you on the spot of being looking at the time and speaking, but I would also like to know Cloud Kitchen, and that's where, you know, that's by definition it's dark kitchen, right? Like you guys call it, and
Correct.
Customers don't see it. How do you build trust with the customer there? If you can just give us a quick perspective of the industry.
Correct. I think after all the great points by Naveen and Daniel and of course Professor Mishra, I'm just going to be reiterating a few of those points because the points, I mean, say it all. We're from the cloud kitchen industry, and I resonate with what Naveen said. You know, what he said with the tourism industry, at least 80% of those points resonate with the hospitality industry. There are too many moving parts in the engine. You know, we're a platform. In our case, we're a cloud kitchen platform. We have 5 stakeholders. There are these aggregators, then there's a brand, and there's a kitchen, there is the end customer, and then there is us, the network, right? Anybody can mess up. Anybody can mess up at any of these steps. So, say for example, there was a wrong item sent, or there was an ice cream being sent, but there was a temperature damage there, or you know, a customer placed an order, it went after 2 hours. So there are too many moving parts in the engine. So in the end, who suffers is always the platform, the aggregator, and of course us, the network, because the brand is going to push the blame to us. The customer is also going to push the blame to us because they are operating the entire network. I feel there is no magical formula or set algorithm to kind of create trust amongst all those stakeholders in the entire ecosystem. Leaderships should be interacting with each other, should be engaging with each other. Communication cadence is very important between all stakeholders. And of course, you know, getting back to the basics, transparency, feedback. I mean, Professor Mishra mentioned a very valid point that, and even Naveen mentioned a very valid point. In the pandemic, all of these brands had to kind of, you know, give solutions to all of these customers who had booked travel, and that goes down to I'll go a step back. So how a customer can get back to you is with feedback. So with feedback comes redressal, with feedback comes support, and with feedback comes solution. So feedback is key, and as a business, feedback is the key, and feedback is what keeps us going. Transparency is of course a given. It's the foundation of any business, and of course we're a service industry. We don't even call ourselves product. And we work with all of the top brands like, you know, likes of Baskin Robbins, Kevin Turs. We work with Vadilal and all of these top F&B legendary brands. Product is their scope of work. Our scope of work is service. And you know, if you mess up the product, customer can come back to you again. But if you mess up the service, customer is never going to come back to you again. And I'll be very short there. And 2 pointers that I just wanted to kind of stress on. One is transparency, and one is communication cadence amongst the leadership across all stakeholders.
Thank you, Madhav. I'm sorry we had to keep it very short with you. That was definitely not the intention. I think with this, we come to a close of this very, very interesting conversation on an extremely relevant topic today. Like Mr. Jha had mentioned that, you know, during the COVID, with a lot of challenges coming in various parts of functions and industries, big spurious products have cropped up, and I think everyone's responsible in controlling that in their businesses, because it's extremely important for customer trust. Daniel spoke a lot about how Amazon is over-indexing using technology and over-indexing on building customer promise through constant monitoring and constantly tracking, delisting, and working with sellers, and also intentions to work with government agencies. Mr. Jha also pointed out how important it is that e-commerce platforms, with the growth in online commerce, it has become extremely important for them to take this as priority with the risks going up. He also put up a very valid topic on legal recourse. Today, legal recourse is slow or not good enough for infringement of trademark, patent, and copyright laws. I think that's an area for the government to look into, and I think in the industry to constantly work together with the government. Professor Mishra's forceful points on transparency, and something that he really mentioned has stuck to me, that a lot of times in the industry we see certain things like this is mandatory, this is something that we need to do to comply. I think mandatory compliance is one thing, but building customer promise through what is not compulsory or is voluntary. I think it is very important that we build cadence around that across our entire value chain. The other thing about redressal of customer complaints and customer dissatisfaction, being accountable and prioritizing that in the organization. The idea on every helpline being 24/7 is a food for thought also for me, as it is for a lot of other people. Naveen, completely understand the challenges that the travel industry is going through, and the way you as a leader, other than the topic, I think I see a very strong face in you, which gives resilience and camaraderie, spirit of camaraderie to a lot of other industries going through challenges on the side of the topic, which is very refreshing to see. But your topic on personalization and standardization, which can sometimes be seen as contradictory, and how one actually gives a personalized experience by standardizing processes. I think that's a big food for thought. So is the food for thought of building relationships across the chain. All related parties working together, building relationships. I think that is something that really strikes me. And yeah, of course, I mean, regulation. Every industry needs to constantly work with agencies, with the government, to build the right kind of regulations, which only improve the customer promise and trust. Madhav, we had very little time for you, but your point on transparency and feedback for your industry. I'm myself a consumer of food delivery, and I understand how much I, as a consumer, always look at feedback from other customers, and I think it is also important internally for companies like you to incorporate that in the system. Thank you so much, gentlemen. It was a real pleasure chatting up with you. I wish we had a bit of more time. We're actually overshot by 17 minutes. I'll just call it off right now with my thanks to each one of you.
Thank you. Abhishek. You did a great job. You really moderated it well. So
very nice. I must say, very nicely. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you very much for having us on the panel. Thank you so much, and all the best. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
views to the customer is extremely important at this time. Also, your entire supply chain, your own employees, what should be your approach towards them? This was also a period where we saw a lot of counterfeits in the market. The customer was extremely vulnerable. You had fake vaccines as well. There are audits going on. So there's a lot to think about, lot to talk about today. We are joined by Rahul Shankar, the CEO of Modi Care. We have Amit Bhasin, Executive Vice President and Head Legal at Marico. Sumit Mathur, Director Marketing, Kellogg. He is the Head of Marketing for South Asia and Southeast Asia. We've got Aditya Rao, Partner at PLR Chambers as well. Sumit, if I can begin with you, why don't you give us a sense? And, I'd like to begin with some opening comments from each of our panelists. We'll take about a minute each to share your views on the topic before we throw this discussion open. Sumit, if I can begin with you, your thoughts on the topic and your experiences over the last 1.5 to 2 years.
No, thanks, Parikshit, and it's great to be here. And it's something that's obviously live and very, very critical for all of us to think about, right? The pandemic has now been it's been something that's been there for almost a year and a half for us, and therefore how all of us react to it is critical. And I was reflecting on some of the things that Parikshit you were just mentioning, and one thing sort of stands out for me. And given I come, my background is a marketer, I think that's how I'll think about it. That these have been trying times for our consumers. They have been vulnerable, and therefore, what the responsibility we as marketers and as businessmen have in terms of how we walk the fine line. At the end of the day, there's always this need to solve problems for our consumers, and that's correct, and we should all do that. But where does the boundary between overzealousness, and we have seen that also, and I'm sure we'll talk about it today, where does the boundary between solving a real problem and being overzealous in what you are doing, and how do you manage that? And that's, I think, separates responsible marketing from a lot of other stuff that we might have seen today. So I guess that's probably what my core thought is, and that if we can have a conversation on and maybe come out fruitful with some actions, I guess that's the crux for me, Parikshit.
Right, responsible marketing, that is the key word. Let me move on to Amit. Amit, we've spoken before about your experiences of the last 2 years, counterfeits in the market, fake products. When you think about this topic, what is the most important message that comes to your mind?
Sure, thanks, Parikshit, and glad to be here discussing a topic which is again something very close to my heart. Yes, it was unprecedented times, and I was reflecting on it. The companies and the corporations which have always worked with a purpose and always have called ethics and doing business ethically as their core. During the pandemic time, it was easy to cut corners, right? And as the saying goes that, doing the business right way is not only when, things are going good. It is also the testing time is when chips are down. And I think that was the time of pandemic when it was important to get the business afloat while ensuring that you are not compromising on any of your core principles, right? And that was, I think, a clear challenge for many businesses. But I think the businesses which will long last are those which have lived by those ethics and lived by those purpose even these trying times, right? Those who have not compromised on their core values are the businesses which will see a larger success. And there are, again, unprecedented examples during these times. The second point you talked about is counterfeiting. And yes, we discussed about it. The supply chains of normal businesses were impacted. Goods were not there in the market and consumers were asking for it. And it therefore was a very sweet spot for counterfeiters actually to fill in the supply chain with the fake products. As responsible companies, it was important for us to ensure that we take right actions, ensure that consumers are kind of aware and have a clear differentiation between a fake product and a genuine product. So yeah, I think it was a time for companies actually to get their act together and ensure that they do more on ethics and more on compliance during these pandemic times. That's really my thought on this.
Right. Thanks, Amit. Rahul, what would be your sense when we speak about these key words, brand protection and integrity? What do these words really mean to you?
Well, I think my view overall is that the pandemics actually, like you said, of course, it's cliched to just say that it's caused disruption. My view, I think it's caused acceleration on a lot of fronts. So I think acceleration, in the way, the consumers are looking at brands, in the way, the alertness, the entire sort of alertness quotient has gone up significantly. But the expectations of the consumers have gone up significantly, right? I mean, if you look at all of this and look at all the stuff that, let's say, the e-commerce channel has done, for instance, it's just given not just access and good pricing for the right product, but it's also created a reverse supply chain of returning the products if you're not liking it, or if you find that it's counterfeit, etc. Right? I mean, look at it. So easy now, right? I mean, you order something on a platform, and you don't like it, just return it back. And there's a reverse supply chain that takes care of that. So the consumer is seeing all of this, right? I mean, the consumer is getting more and more demanding, right? So the consumer is getting more and more aware. B, the consumer is getting more and more connected, has got more and more access to brands. And also, the entire thing of, access to social handles, just highlighting if there's something not right, flawed, etc., etc. So I know I've talked about a much larger scope than what we started out with, but I feel that it's a three-pronged approach. So there is a responsibility that the manufacturers stroke marketers have, which is us. Right, on towards consumer in general, and towards our respective corporations, upholding the ethics and moralities and compliances, etc. On the second front, there is also work to be done on the regulatory front to really safeguard the manufacturers as well as the consumers. And third, of course, is the entire sort of consumer piece, right? I mean, how do you get the consumers to be even more aware and agile, in terms of how to react and what to do in case they come up with something like that. So very long story. I just tried to sort of cut it short into.
Beautifully done there. But you also spoke a lot about the transition when it comes to the digital economy. And yes, of course, we've seen a huge acceleration towards that. All digital services, e-commerce. Aditya, when we're seeing this kind of acceleration, especially in digital sales, digital marketing, what kind of onus does this put on a company when it comes to brand protection and integrity? It must be throwing up a lot of challenges because you've got so many options. You've got just so much of information there on the digital space that a consumer is looking at every day. So what is the kind of onus that is put on the company?
Well, firstly, glad to be here, and I couldn't agree more with the fellow panelists on their introductory comments. But to come to say the kind of signals that we are now being receptive to in the COVID world, right, as citizen consumers, I think the accountability for the brands has gone up quite a bit in quite manifolds. And in terms of, I would say, brand protection, in terms of looking at the overall onus on the company, I think there are two sides to it. One is your simplistic view of looking at liability, and there the framework has evolved. I'm hopeful we will talk a little bit more about that, since one of my panelists talked about regulation, and the definite term of consumer rights, which actually is now a very all-encompassing term. But more importantly for the brands, I think, and for responsible brands, I think the challenge is becoming one where which are the distributional channels that you are able to look at, where is the provenance and traceability available, because at the end of the day, as an average consumer, the ability to distinguish between various products and sources thereof coming from the same brand becomes very, very difficult. And I'll stop by saying that this is, if not tackled in the right way, I think this is a losing battle constantly losing battle, eroding value from all three sets. Consumers don't get what they want, get substandard products. In some cases, I won't even ascribing even the term substandard is going to be giving a gold level to the kind of products that are made available. May cause harm more than economic. For the brands themselves, is a huge brand erosion issue. We know of certain segments. We spoke offline about this, Parikshit, where customers, knowing that there's a lot of counterfeiting happening, are fairly reticent to buy products no matter what the medium, unless they're assured in a particular way. And lastly, which is from the exchequer's point of view, I just happened to glance through a couple of reports. I think the World Anti-Counterfeiting Day was on June 10th, and there's a report that counterfeiting has gone up about 20% in India, and the figures just in loss to exchequer is in billions. So I think it's a holistic sort of approach that one would need to take. But coming back to brands and the onus, well, unfortunately or fortunately for them, it's make it or break it, right?
It's a make it or break it. Let me get back to Sumit. Sumit, let's try and break down the topic a bit. If we speak about brand integrity, how important was this for you? Tell us how you tried to approach the customer over the last 2 years during the pandemic. Of course, there were a lot of changes happening. People were becoming more and more curious. Nobody had ever seen this kind of a pandemic, this kind of a disease before. There were no solutions initially. How did your approach change when it came to brand integrity? How important did this term become for Kellogg?
I think it's a great question. See, the role of trust in a brand has always been critical. If you do a driver study across all big brands, trust is one of the things that we all always look for. How trusted are you versus some of the other players? And if you look at all the big brands in India, that will stand up there. So trust has always been critical. But I think in the current context, it has become, as somebody said, it make it or break it, right? I think. And I'll tell you two reasons in my mind why this has happened, and then I'll talk about what we at Kellogg's have tried to do on. I think one of the things I have seen, and we talked about it, is that I think Rahul talked about acceleration, and the way I articulate that is one of the biggest barriers for any category's adoption or any brand's adoption is consumer inertia. Typically, right? That's what you try to solve for. Now, in a scenario like this, consumer inertia is actually a passive because people are vulnerable, right? In a situation like this, they are continuously evaluating new choices, and that's happening, right? So now, in a scenario, when that's happening, it can be looked at as an opportunity. It reminds me of Winston Churchill's quote, right? Never waste a good crisis. But how you sort of solve for it is critical in some of these, right? So you saw a lot of things happening, as some of the panelists mentioned, whether it is about the kind of products that were being launched, whether it is about the kind of claims getting made. We saw a lot of immunity-led claims, etc., coming out, a lot of them being challenged as well, for example. Right? A lot of new products coming to the market as well. Right? Honestly, for me, it was very simple, right? As long as, there are a couple of guardrails you keep in mind on how you are going to go about it. Sorry, before I go there, one more point was, how are you tapping into solving a problem when a consumer is vulnerable, or are you exploiting it? And are you clear on how you go about doing it, right? So claims, products, and what is your approach as a brand? So the guardrails that we have kept for us at Kellogg's, and I know a lot of good companies already do that, a lot of responsible marketers already do that, that number one, can your product deliver to what you are saying? If you can't deliver, does not make sense. And I can vouch for a lot of companies. I've worked with some of the panelists here. We have those guardrails in place. Ensure that your product delivers to the benefit or the claim you are making. Right. Number two, coming to the claims part of it itself. Right. What are the kind of claims that are in scope, and what are the kind of claims that are out of scope? So as an organization, not just in India, globally, we said we are not going to touch immunity. That's it, right? Now, can you, is it true for every company in India? No, but I know a lot of responsible companies took that call that only if you can truly deliver. It's not to say that things can't deliver, they can, but you need to be able to deliver it. Otherwise, don't touch it. Don't try and say, I have 1.01% of something which can help solve immunity. It doesn't help. You are exploiting your consumer now. Over a period of time, they will get it, right? That's the second piece. And the third piece, which I talked about, is how are you talking to your consumer, right? It's been proven before during recessionary environments, and even more so now, right? That when you are vulnerable, you are looking for hope. And are you trying to build that in people and in the country itself? So are you playing on fear psychosis? There were brands that talked about there's lockdown, why don't you upload stock, etc., right? Doesn't work, right? That's very, very short-term thinking. So are you playing on fear psychosis? But equally, there were brands which were trying to drive positivity and get the mood of the nation and the consumer. And I think those are the 3 or 4 guardrails we have kept in mind over the last 1.5 years, right?
Right.
I mean, be clear on your benefit, have a scope defined on what you want to say and what you don't want, and build hope. I think those 3 things we have kept in mind at Kellogg's.
Right. No, that's a very interesting point. I'm going to take it straight across to Amit. Amit, just taking off from where Sumit left, and this was interesting things that he gave us, that you need to, of course, be positive. You need to give hope to the customer, but at the same time, do not overpromise. Do not say things which your product cannot deliver. For example, if Kellogg cannot promise you immunity due to a particular product, and don't tell the customer about it, and be very clear about the pros and cons and the benefits of the product. Do you think this kind of an approach is good for business? Again, we'll go back to COVID-19, and we had so many products in the market. All of a sudden, you had immunity boosters, all kinds, and the efficacy was untested. The only thing that can protect you, frankly, from COVID-19 are vaccines. So do you think this kind of a positive approach where you focus on the benefits of your product, do not overpromise at all, try and create awareness, does this really help the marketing of the product, help in generating revenue in the long run? Is positive advertising, is positive awareness good for business?
Yeah, I think Sumit has put it very, very rightly, right? And I think one of the message from Sumit, what Sumit has said also is that whether it is a time of disturbance or it is normal time, what should not change is the first principles, right? And the first principles of any responsible marketing company is that deliver what you are promising, right? And substantiate it with right kind of a data, substantiate it with right kind of information. A product which was there in market, right, for ages, and you never talked about immunity, suddenly because the pandemic had come, cannot start delivering immunity-based claim unless you have done some reformulation and you have come out with a new product, right? A product which is known to be at an emotive level, some ingredient, as Sumit is also highlighting, cannot start delivering immunity, right? And I think consumer may be vulnerable at this point in time, but consumer is smart, right? Over a period of time, they will see through. And that's why these practices are not sustainable. Even if people have tried to build short-term business gains, looking at an opportunity that consumer is asking for immunity, and anything which will, with an immunity health-led claim, will go and sell, may work for a short term. I'm not denying it. You may get some short-term benefit, but does not work for the companies which are built for long-term. And the consumer trust will get eroded very easily. I think the other point that I'm trying to make here is that during this time, government also came with a lot of regulation, a lot of guidelines on saying that if you are coming with immunity-based claims, health-based claims, they have to pass with XYZ test, right? There were few approval processes, by the way, which were in place in few specific states. My point is this, when the whole nation and the world is really struggling with a pandemic, right? As a responsible business, will you take benefit of the situation, or will you act as a responsible stakeholder and help government to also meet the challenge that it is up? It was not the time for government to start scrutinizing your claims. It is not the time for governments and regulatory machinery to start challenging your things. They did that, by the way. But I think that as a responsible company, you should have your own conscience and do the things which is right thing for do to the business, right? So absolutely, I think there may be few short-term benefits of those claims. But if you talk of sustainable businesses can only be built when you are able to earn trust of consumers over the long term.
Right. Great points that you need to win the trust of a consumer over a long period of time, especially if you want to be in a business for a long period of time, if you have a long future in mind. But, I'm going to go take this across to Rahul now. Rahul, we've had this conversation also, and you put it very nicely in the beginning that while this was a disruptor, this was a time of huge opportunities as well. We saw new avenues opening up, new business opportunities, new work models, remote models coming up, companies realizing that we can move 70% of our workforce to work from home permanently, and yet we can get our business off, get our work done. But at the same time, I'd like to ask you again about brand integrity. How important is it to focus on brand integrity when you're developing a product from the beginning, especially when it comes to looking at joint ventures, looking at scaling up your business, looking at investments from abroad, or maybe targeting markets across the world? How important is this term integrity for a brand when it comes to attracting investments, starting off exports, and just increasing a global footprint?
Absolutely, Parikshit. I think that's a very important question. But I just want to make one small point on my fellow comments of my fellow panelists that we just heard. So I think driving relevance for your product or your or set of products is totally fair. I mean, it's okay if you drive relevance for your if you have already immunity boosters and you haven't really talked about them with much of noise in the past, and in the current context it becomes very relevant, it's absolutely fine if you start over marketing these products. Over marketing. Don't misunderstand my word over marketing here, because the key guardrail here is to stay authentic. As long as you're being authentic to yourself and towards the consumer who's eventually going to consume your product, I think it's absolutely fair, because businesses out there the key purpose is to grow, right? I mean, the key purpose is to grow your bottom line, as long as you're doing it in an authentic way without compromising on your authenticity. It's absolutely fair. So if brands have done that and driven relevance, I think let's give credit to them for excelling, as long as they were authentic, right? And taking advantage of that. I mean, you call it taking advantage, but at the end of it, we are all in business, right? I mean, at the end of it, it's all about growing the business. Coming back to this point about international expansion and all of that, and yes, we did discuss this offline. I think it's very important that and this is an Indian company, by the way. I represent an Indian direct selling company. Unlike some of my fellow panelists who are from multinational organizations, and then we want to step outside of India, and the barometer changes significantly. Like we are looking at right now a foray into Europe, and it's very, very, very important, for us to take, to prove to the authorities out there that and the product really qualifies, versus all the relevant tests and certifications over there. For example, I've got a whole list of tests and certifications that I have on my paper here right now. I don't want to bore you all with that, but when you're looking at markets like UK, it's a totally different ball game. When I use the term acceleration, and when I said that this disruption is actually, I see this disruption. Of course, whatever it's caused to humankind is everybody knows that, but this has definitely accelerated, on businesses on a lot of fronts, right?
Right.
We would have not imagined that we will expand internationally so quickly, but we realized that during the pandemic, we've really reinvented ourselves. We've managed to run the business digitally, almost like the entire business digitally. And who would have imagined FMCG companies could run working from home, right? I mean, it was never imaginable, right? It happened, right? And now there's so much confidence. Right now, I'm in the house. I'm operating from home at this point. I mean, it's just, and the business has catapulted. We were on the right side of the pandemic, frankly. Direct selling sort of, really took off. Our business grew by about, over 40% last year during the year of the pandemic. But the big point I'm trying to make is that the barometer changes as you step outside into the developed part of the world. And while there is a huge gap between where India is in its the level of quality standards, etc., but this gap is definitely what it used to be, definitely not what it used to be till maybe about a couple of years back. What I'm trying to say is that Indian companies have now become more and more conscious, because the consumer is, like, again, I'm making the same point that I made earlier. The consumer is getting more and more conscious and more social media, sort of savvy. And that's actually put the brands on alert. Right. So it's very interesting. I think this is a very, very exciting phase for both for the consumers and for savvy marketers. And that's the space we're in. This is, I keep saying, in a Formula One race, and it's not like I'm a huge follower of Formula One races, but in a Formula One race, the point where you have the highest probability of going past the other car, we know is the bend, right? Right, because that's when you got to take control of the steering, press the accelerator at the right time. Otherwise, every car is running at more than 300 kmph, right? This is the bend. What we're going through right now is the bend. Now, at this bend, if you hold the steering properly, if you accelerate at the right time, when you look back, when the road is going to get straightened, which is going to happen, right? I mean, as the pandemic goes away, pandemic is not forever. The road is going to straighten up, and when you look back, you'll realize that you've put a lot of people behind you. So I think that's the phase we are in. So I'm actually, frankly, on a business front, very, very excited about this, because this has accelerated, a lot of stuff for us.
Right. No, I think you had a very important point that if you've got an authentic product, then don't be afraid of over marketing. If you're sure about your product, be honest about it, but then go the full hilt with it when it comes to marketing or trying to sell it. That's a fair point as well. Now, Aditya, I'd like to come back to the point about regulation and laws, something that is very close to your heart as well. Now, we have, as all our panelists have spoken about, the acceleration in different segments of businesses over the last 2 years. Now, when we are seeing this kind of escalation in marketing activities, escalation in the different kinds of products which are available in the market, what is the role of the government? What is the role of the government as a regulator, and how much control should they really exercise so that your clearances happen expeditiously? At the same time, the customer, the consumer across the country gets the right product and gets the right choices.
Well, that's a long essay response question. But what I'll try and say is, let me answer it in an inverted fashion. I think the overall responsibility being reposed on the government and government alone is a fallacy. It almost never works, let alone our size. Even in geographies much smaller than ours, issues of counterfeiting, standards, brand protection, intertwined with intellectual property, import laws, standard approvals, these are items which have to be developed along with the private sector. And therefore, if I were to say, and I'll go back to what I started out by saying, make it or break it, the fact of the matter is that if you're willing to spend, let's say, X% of your business margin on marketing, a reasonable portion of that X% should probably also go in capacity building and initiatives towards brand protection and anti-counterfeiting, right? As far as the government is concerned, I honestly think, even though we've got the new Consumer Protection Act, and that's a big one to watch out for, by the way, whether be it direct selling, be it FMCG, be it, I mean, all or any product or services companies need to really look out for this one. And the reason why this act, to me, is going to bring out one of the largest changes in the future is that I mentioned one term, consumer rights. Now I'm going to talk about another one, which is unfair contract and two actually unfair trade practices. So there's a total of three. Pivoted around these three terms, which have now been defined and put out, there is a whole scope for regulation by the CCPA, which is the authority that has been established at the national level. Now, consider this, that you're a righteous player. You've gone out and done everything by the book. Of course, when you're putting out and making marketing claims, there may be a bit of adventure, if not misdemeanor. But there may be other actors looking at the same opportunity around the hairpin bend that Rahul was mentioning, who say, I don't want the same standard F1 block, engine block in my car. I want to be able to use a different block and take undue advantage. Now, the fact of the matter is that small firm effect, resulting in a complaint going to a collector, looking at that becoming the benchmark outlier behavior, and then that benchmark outlier behavior becoming the norm in terms of guidelines or rules for the industry. That is the danger that you need to actually watch out for. That's going to do two things. One, worst for the consumer, it's going to completely stifle innovation. You're seeing stuff around this, and I'm sure both Sumit and Rahul will be well versed about this, on issues as to what are nutraceuticals versus what are actually drugs and pharmaceutical products, right? So it stifles innovation. It actually limits options for consumers. And on the second side, it actually completely lays bare companies who are actually the good actors, right? The incentive to be ethical suddenly starts to erode, and you can see that, okay, my CAGR is going to be restricted to a single digit if I'm going to be moving along these lines. So I think the winded answer to what you're saying is that the government plays a very active role where they can. But to be very honest, do you really imagine, let's be practical, that a ministry which is looking at a catena of issues at the central level on a state and center divided allocated subject, a police official who's looking at probably 170 to 80 laws within his jurisdiction on a daily routine basis with exigent matters, along with a administrative officer who's probably looking at implementation of about 70 to 80 schemes on a monthly basis for their administrative region, really has the bandwidth and ability to assist us in real time with respect to these issues. And that's where I go back to my point on saying that a committed investment has to be made by the responsible companies for the benefit of the ecosystem.
All right, so committed investments for the benefit of the ecosystem. I'm going to come to the regulatory point once again with Sumit, with Amit as well. But before that, I want to speak about brand protection. Brand protection is the other part of our discussion today. And, we were discussing this earlier today, Rahul, and you were telling us about some of the measures that you're taking towards protecting your brand over the last 2 years. Give us a sense of how important this has become for you.
Extremely important, Parikshit. So what we've, what's the background? The background, and I mentioned the word being authentic, right? So what we do really on every product, and I mean every product, every piece that we sell of every SKU, which is about 720 SKUs in number, every label carries a personal guarantee from our founder to say that I certify that this product is good quality, and if you don't like it, even if you consume 25% of it, you can return it. And he signs it, right? So that's there on every label. Now that's a very, very big claim, right? I mean, it's very daring, to say the least, right? But the fact is that then you got to live with it. We made that claim, and now it's the responsibility of the management to live up to that claim, right? So what we do is we've got a return exchange process, and of course it's not like the Amazons or Flipkarts of the world. I would say it's not as easy as it is there in e-commerce, and we want to get there. So that's the road for us. However, we want to now take it to the next level by saying that, and we are exploring this right now, to say that we sell authentic products and with the utmost sort of quality and standards maintained, etc., etc. And we want this authentic product to only reach the consumer. So what we're working on right now is to say if we can have an invisible barcode stroke QR code on the labels. Okay, and this goes on the line while the product is being manufactured, right? Online, a random sort of code that gets embedded in the packaging, and you don't have to do it across all 722 SKUs. You could probably pick the top 10-15% of your SKUs which contribute to, like Pareto says, 60-70% of your business, and create a mechanism by which, as an organization, you could scan and find out whether this is really your product or not. But there's a worry here. The worry really is that the loop does not get closed fully, right? Because at the end of it, the consumer is still duped by the counterfeit product, right? And that becomes very critical. So while as a company, I would say, what the product that you brought to me is counterfeit. It's not real, because you see, I can find out this is not our product. But where does the poor consumer go really, right? So that loop also needs to be closed. So while, of course, we've safeguarded ourselves as an organization to say, this is a counterfeit product, this is not our product, and we'll not be able to exchange it. We may have lost sales, but that's fine. We'll at least not return it. But the consumer is duped, right? And at the end of it, a negative rub-off does happen on the brand, right? I mean, at the end of it, right? So if somebody's picked up a product which is our brand, even if it's a counterfeit product, there is a negative rub-off on our brand. I mean, he may or may not come back to our brand again, right? Because he knows that there is counterfeit available in the market. So while what we're trying to do is one step closer to where where we should be, but definitely not there fully from a consumer perspective, and which is why I made that earlier point about an awareness at the consumer end on how to find how to differentiate between a counterfeit and a real product, and B, having the right regulatory framework, okay, to help the consumer and the manufacturer stroke marketer to finally sort of close the loop on this. So it's going to be a huge investment, by the way. Imagine putting a unique code embedded in the packaging of every product, right? And we sell products all the way from INR 35 to 4,500 rupees, right? So it's going to be a huge cost, but you know what? We're willing to take that cost in the P&L, in the interest of the consumer and in the interest of the integrity of the brand, right? That's how serious one has to be about maintaining the integrity and authenticity of a brand.
Absolutely. Sumit, we heard Rahul there about all the steps that they are taking, Modi Care is taking to ensure brand protection, brand integrity. Tell us about some of the steps that you have been taking at Kellogg. And again, coming back to the regulatory framework, how much intervention should there be from the government? What are some of the steps that the government can take to ease up clearances, and steps that they can take that can help the private sector increase its brand protection and integrity?
I think the first point is government. It's the government. It's not God, right? At the end of the day, I think we need to understand that. So I think Aditya mentioned that, and therefore the fact that there is more public-private partnership that is happening now, and if you see it as a journey, I think that has significantly improved. I think that's the starting point of some of these. So the forum that we're talking on today itself is one of those to think about it, right? But how do we more actively engage? And I think this will happen from both sides. जैसे कहते हैं ताली दोनों तरफ से बजती है, and that's the starting point in my mind of this. And that's at an overall level in terms of how we need to approach it. Coming specifically to the point, Parikshit, you were talking about, right? And I think there's one part that Rahul talked about, which is very clear, which is from a counterfeiting point of view and how you protect both the consumer and yourself. If I think about it, there's also some part which has always been there for a very long time, right? Which is the entire piece on trademarks. if you think about it. That's also brand protection at the end of the day. And yeah, that's not a new story. That's a story that has existed. And there are ways and means to ensure you keep yourself protected through the entire trademark process. Either it is in terms of the kind of, and this goes back, you look at any developed market and you look at the way private labels are there, right? So that they're everywhere. It's not an India story itself. So how strong is your trademark process? How well oiled that machine is, and how, whether it is from a packaging point of view, whether it's the claims that you are making on it, what are other kind of clinicals you have done versus what a private label has not done, and so on and so forth. That's the piece which we particularly work on to ensure that our trademarks are ring fenced, for a lack of a better word, versus what's happening in the market. I think the counterfeiting, I think what Rahul mentioned is a great example. Otherwise, you always have, as any large FMCG company will have, and I'm sure Amit will talk about it as well. In the multiple companies I have worked with, you have strong processes to know what's happening in the market in terms of counterfeit, and you keep at it, you keep working with the government on it to make it difficult to happen. I think some of these things never go away, but you need to be active as an organization. It's your business at the end of the day. So you need to raise your voice, and you need to ensure that you find more and more of it and solve it. So there'll always be some future thinking, that the way that Rahul mentioned, there's some base stuff that we need to continue doing. And then there's, of course, this trademark angle, which is also a second lever that one needs to think.
Right. No, that's an important point. And I think that it's your business and you need to ensure its protection and integrity. But let me get a view from Mariko now. Amit, from your own experience, tell us about some of the challenges that you may have come across over the last 2 years when it came to brand protection, integrity, counterfeit products. That is something you have been speaking about a lot. Some of the challenges that you foresee as we move out and emerge out of the pandemic. As Rahul said, we will not be afflicted by the pandemic forever, but it will be definitely a part of our lives for possibly the next 2 years.
Yeah, I think all of Sumit, Rahul have kind of made valid points on the issue of counterfeiting, and I think this is such a vast topic that we can spend next kind of half an hour, 1 hour on this itself. But I will briefly talk about it. I think this problem was always there, right? And there is a same saying again that if you are famous, you will be fake. That's true, right? This problem has become more complicated and more sophisticated with the period of time, right? We have seen the conventional counterfeiting where a consumer goes to the shop and there is a product which looks exactly the same, but is not going to deliver the same benefit. That's the conventional way of counterfeiting, right? But today, with the advent of e-commerce and all, you don't have that option. What you see on your mobile screen may be a genuine image, but what will get delivered may not be a genuine product, right? So that the problem has got complicated today. With new technologies coming in, the product that comes, and I don't want to name a country, but from the product that comes from some of our neighboring countries are as good and at times better in quality from a packaging point of view, that it's very difficult for a lay consumer to even differentiate what is a counterfeit and what is a genuine product. So the problem is only becoming complex day by day. I think to my mind, it is a problem of economics, right? The counterfeiters make huge money into this. And that's a fact, right? A product which is sold in a market for 150 rupees will cost them 30 bucks. And they use various means, different supply chains. For them, they make big money in a counterfeit. You talked about challenge. I think the biggest challenge I have seen is, despite taking most holistic actions on the counterfeiter, you tend to see 6 months down the line, they will be back. They will be back and they will be bigger. That's the problem. So you are not able to crack the network in a way that it does not re-erupt. And it is now a full-fledged parallel economy. So it's a problem of economics. Unless you give an impact to the counterfeiters where it does not make economic sense for them to counterfeit, this will continue. And hence the point that I think Sumit made, Rahul made, that all stakeholders need to come together. While companies are doing in the past, and they will continue to do actions, whether on e-commerce, whether on conventional, whether on customs related thing, all that will continue. It is also about having consumer awareness. It is also government agencies equally enforcing some of the laws we have. It's not that we don't have laws. It's about enforcing some of those laws in the right spirit, right? And consumers genuinely saying that, listen, I will not buy a product if I am getting it at 50% discount, right? The consumer today is very vulnerable, saying 50% discount, oh, why, it's a great deal, let's go and buy it. So I think some of all those things have to come together if you have to really solve it. And I don't think it's an easy solve, it's a long-term solve, but stakeholders have to really come together to do it. And actually, people who are engaged in this will continue to be engaged unless it is really nip it in the bud in a very systematic way.
Okay, now I'll take final questions from all our panelists, and we'll request all of you to leave us with final comments. There must be a lot of people tuning in, watching this discussion right now, and we'd request you for final thoughts now. I'll start with Sumit, your final thoughts. How would you like to sum up this discussion?
First of all, as I said, thanks a ton. It was lovely engaging with all the panelists here. I hope anybody who was listening also found it useful. Honestly, for me, just one thing, and I heard that, the good news is I heard it from everybody, and I heard that word talked again and again. Whatever the scenario, be authentic. And I think that the sum and substance of it, that's what we need to be. We have a responsibility for our consumers. There will be times, of course, you have to make use of opportunities the way you can, but as long as you are being authentic with what you are doing, we'll probably be on the right track. So let's all of us at least make that pledge that we do that in every action we do.
In every action. Aditya, what about you? What are the final thoughts that you would like to leave our viewers with?
I would say that I think the 3 bullet points and my takeaway from this very elaborate discussion is I would stand by collective action and coalition, which needs to come in from the industry. I think the second lever of that is going to be self-regulation, along with active participation from citizen consumers. You by yourself determining what is a genuine provenance traceability mechanism does not really help unless a consumer can check it. You have these mechanisms available in very high priced brands where by putting a serial number, I'm able to cross-check whether or not it's actually coming in from the right source or not. And third, absolutely awareness. I think awareness is the key to almost all of this. Things like what Amit said, I think it has to be just broken down, not between fake and genuine. I think the transactional nature of how the millennial customer, which by the way, today is making the consumer choices for most of their households in the digital world. It has to be transactional. So you need to be able to pop out to say, hey, you're getting a 50% discount. I love the example that Amit gave. There's something absolutely wrong there. Be sure about who the reseller is, unless you know that they are prone to giving such huge discounts. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me. Thank you.
Okay, and Rahul, what are the thoughts that you would like to leave us with?
Well, I think this was brilliant. Frankly, some of the comments were very, very interesting, and I'm sure this will help us sort of craft our strategy ahead. But I feel that and I think Aditya just talked about collective consciousness and stuff. I feel that there should be that collective onus. Now, if I look at the response to counterfeiting today, it's pretty much really dependent on the manufacturer marketer, right? Because there's just one entity which is concerned, to be honest, right? So there is the onus of finding the counterfeiters and bringing them to justice is entirely today dependent on the marketer stroke manufacturer, right? I think that needs to change because, and I think Aditya only shared some numbers, 20%, right, Aditya? That's the number you said. 20% of it is last year was counterfeit. These are obviously significant brands that we're talking about, consumer brands, which means that there's a huge loss to the exchequer. So I would really urge the policymakers to take notice of this and understand that this is not just an industry problem, by the way. This is not just a marketer's problem. This is an economic problem. And of course, the consumer is at the receiving end of it. So if there can be inspectors, for other regulatory checks, there can be inspectors deployed. I mean, I'm not really favoring the inspector, Raj, sorry to say that, but I'm just saying that's the level of seriousness they have on regulatory policies, right? You need to have a similar seriousness, of counterfeit as well. Don't just leave it to the marketer trying to, solve that problem, for themselves. We really need help. And that's where the policymakers really need to step in and, and sort of, give us a framework that just sort of, helps the entire process. So that's,
at the end,
that's
as
the big
Amit
thing. Yeah.
As Amit had pointed out, that it should not, counterfeiting should not make economic sense to whoever the seller is. But Amit, I'd take the final comments from you. What is the biggest trend that you foresee when it comes to brand protection and integrity going forward?
I think we talked about millennials, and Aditya talked about the fact that if there is a deep discount available, they will go to that. But the reverse is also true, that the consumer today is more aware, right? They are holding companies more accountable, and this trend is only going to increase, right? We will find corporates being more and more accountable, being more and more answerable to the consumers of tomorrow, because they are going to ask these questions. And therefore, doing business in an ethical way, doing business in a purposeful way, and ensuring that your consumer is aware is not going to be an option anymore. It is going to be a mandate, right? And I think it's important that we pick up this soon and make it as a collective responsibility to do business in an ethical way, in a purposeful way, and make it in the norm, right? Because consumers are going to question this. I think that's the biggest trend to my mind, and we see it happening already across the world. And I think India is the right position as of now, with many companies already kind of imbibing what Aditya called as self-governance, and I think that's really the way forward for me. Thank you.
That's really the way forward. But thank you very much, Rahul, Amit, Sumit, and Aditya, for joining us, discussing brand protection integrity in times of COVID-19. This has given us a lot to think about, and some very positive trends going forward. But at the end of the day, the most important takeaways being that one has to remain authentic, make sure that your product is authentic. You can go ahead for over marketing once you're sure about your product. And at the same time, we need to make sure that counterfeiting is checked as well. There has to be an economic loss to people who are indulging in that, and it should not make economic sense to them as well. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on this discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Parikshit.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.